I guarantee the story that you're about to hear is one that you think you know quite well, but really know nothing about. That is precisely what we do here at Architecture and Crime. We break down these historic criminal events through the lens of architecture. How these buildings came to be in the first place, and then how they gave place to such evil people who would do such evil deeds. As we venture through these next 8 episodes, I guarantee you will view the JFK assassination in a whole new light. Welcome to Architecture and Crime, presented by Hosersquad, a group of aspiring young architects. I'm your host, Montgomery Board. Here today we sit 60 years later to the day of the JFK assassination, and yet we sit farther from any true reality of what happened that day. We have been, and will always be told, that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, as a crazy lone gunman, and was successful at taking out our 35th president of these United States. That truth could not be farther from reality, because that truth was made a truth by the very perpetrators who committed this crime, because those people are the same ones in charge of the very investigation into the crime itself. We will show that here, especially because when the perpetrators are the very ones who are in charge of the investigation, evidence is concealed. And the only hope is over time, new evidence comes out. And here, new evidence has. Full disclosure, this is not my evidence. This is not my investigation. I am here to barely give a voice to an incredibly important story. And this story comes from a brand new piece of evidence that was just revealed quite recently. And that piece of evidence is the date book by world-renowned and known spy and known assassin and soldier of fortune, Pierre Lafitte. Pierre Lafitte, there's no mention of him anywhere in the Warren Commission at all, because he was the project manager of what they called Project Lancelot, which was the name given to the operation that killed JFK. Pierre Lafitte kept all of his records, all coded, albeit in very shorthand, but he kept these times and dates and places and people in order. And it was not until long after his death that his widow turned over this piece of evidence to author H.P. Abarelli. H.P. Abarelli and his team spent years investigating these claims and then wrote a book. The book is called Coup in Dallas. This is where a large bulk of this information comes from, along with various other research which will be posted. So who was really involved? How many people who all had an interest in JFK's downfall? We will break down the 10 most important buildings that had to do with the JFK assassination over these next 8 episodes. But more importantly, the perpetrators inside who were able to use these buildings to commit the largest coup that has ever happened in the history of the world. Our first episode starts with one simple question: where did the money come from? If an operation this large has so many people involved, how is it going to be financed, and how can it be concealed from the public? And what we're about to hear is how these very perpetrators were able to use the Republic National Bank building in Dallas to conceal and funnel CIA funds for the murder of our 35th president of these United States. But first, the architecture. So join us as we go through and investigate every single piece through this very unique lens. The building was designed by Wallace K. Harrison, who also notably designed the Lincoln Center, the Rockefeller Center, and was director of planning for the One United Nations complex with Le Corbusier. The Republic National Bank building is located at 325 North St. Paul Street. And it's in the heart of downtown Dallas. This tower is a 36-story skyscraper, and at the time it was the tallest tower west of the Mississippi. The building faces Thanksgiving Square, which has a chapel by Philip Johnson, which is best described like a swirly ice cream cone. But the building is in the heart of downtown Dallas. And it is surrounded currently by tall buildings on all sides, but the time it was built, it was the bee's knees. It was the tallest building around, and when they built it, they really spared no expense at all. They were attempting to create an engineering marvel of its time because on the ground floor, there's absolutely no columns, and the entire floor suspends from the floors above. And this is possible because its very iconic facade, which shimmers in the sunlight, is made out of aluminum and it's extremely lightweight. So it's able to hold all of this structure, and even by today's standards, it's overstructured. Its facade is truly iconic in the downtown Dallas skyline. Really, it's a wonder to see. But currently, it's surrounded by all of these much taller buildings because it even has a building adjacent to it that's almost taller. It looks taller, but it's actually not because they built a second tower in the plaza after these dreadful events. But the second tower built in 1964, well, that was a 50-story tower. And even though the first tower was 36 stories, they added a gigantic spire on top of the original building, so it would be literally 4 feet taller than the new building. That was 14 stories higher than it. But what's even more hilarious is that title only lasted for a year because Elm Place, also in Dallas, completed less than a year later. So it didn't even hold the tallest in Dallas title. This building, from an architectural perspective, pushed some pretty technical engineering bounds, as well as integrating new programs and uses of the space, because up until now, not many buildings actually had underground parking or drive-through, and this had an underground bank drive-through. Fun fact, it also has one of the fastest elevators in the entire nation. I don't know why that's interesting, but I think that's funny. The Republic National Bank occupied its own building up until it failed in 1988 and was eventually absorbed, like almost every other bank, by Bank of America. Today, currently, the building has been completely renovated with a mixed use of space on the ground floor, offices up until the 9th floor, and then residences up until the 35th floor. So yes, you can even rent in the very building that they channeled CIA funds through to murder our very 35th president of these United States. And now, the crime. In the question of how will this operation be financed, three entities do the bidding. One, the Republic National Bank. Two, the Howard Corporation. And three, the Hope Litzel Foundation. You will soon come to find out that these three were not three different things at all, but one very entity run by a very few set of people controlling large swaths of control far beyond their own legalities. With this being a conspiracy, there's clearly a lot of people involved, a lot of names, so I'll try and keep it short and sweet and not get too wordy with it, but it's important to follow all of these people. First, there's the Republic National Bank. The Republic National Bank had a wholly owned subsidiary called the Howard Corporation. And the Howard Corporation had a chairman by the name of Karl Hoblitzell. And he, no surprisingly, had his own charitable foundation called the Hoblitzell Foundation. The Howard Corporation was able to get its big start by trading stocks of its own company. Own company of what? I don't know, but they traded stocks of the company to the bank for the bank's petroleum properties. And then the Howard Corporation went to town on these properties, cranking out everything they could, pumping it all out. Not only were they pumping out oil and gas, but they were buying up other banks and they were buying up other properties of real estate as well. The Howard Corporation invested in 20 Texas banks, real estate, and it paid huge dividends back to the bank. Howard stock was transferred to a trust in 1955, and the Howard Corp assets and profits were undisclosed on the Republic National Bank's official filings. These endeavors would make the Republic National Bank the largest bank in Texas at the time. And to keep it simple, they did this illegally. Banks were not allowed to have branches up until the 90s. That was the bank, Chase Manhattan Bank. That was the bank. They were accused of violating the National Holdings Act, but they were able to convince the Texas banking authorities because all of the banks that the Howard Corporation bought were actually in the trust, and the trust had many different dummy corporations, and each of them owned a bank. So technically, the Republic National Bank didn't own any of them, even though the trust owned it. And the chairman of the trust, chairman of the bank, and chairman of the Howard Corporation were all in cahoots, and two of them were the same person. Sounds sketchy. In one of these banks, Lakewood State Bank, a president is installed who has no prior banking experience at all, but he has a whole bunch of alleged CIA experience. Sounds sketchy, huh? Along with being chair of the Howard Corporation, Karl Hoblitzell also ran his charitable foundation, the Hoblitzell Foundation, very humbly named. According to the Washington Post article by Richard Harwood in 1967, the foundation is, quote, a conduit for CIA funds due to major grants to the International Development Funds, which is basically control of private USAID, and the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which is basically anti-commie propagandists. Harwood alleges that the Hoblitzell Foundation funneled at least $600,000 of CIA funds. And a fun fact, a trustee on the Hoblitzell Foundation is none other than the very federal judge, Sawyer Hughes, who administered the oath of office, the LBJ, not even minutes after his body went limp. In a conspiracy, a lot of evidence is circumstantial. It's the great George Carlin quote, "You don't need a formal conspiracy when interests converge." All these people were friends. All these people were buddies. This is just the tip of the iceberg. About to go deeper. This guy, Karl Hoblitzell, he was not only chairman of the Howard Corporation and president of the Hoblitzell Foundation, but he also became chairman of the board of the Republic National Bank. Do you think those interests would act completely separated? The very same person is literally in all three positions. It's not even three friends, it's the same person in all three positions. Sounds sketchy. A bank, a corporation, and a charitable foundation run by the exact same person. And due to the Howard Corporation expanding its holdings and its influence, due to it being wielded with the power of a bank and a charitable foundation behind it, it was able to expand its holdings to at the time $15 million and pay out millions of dollars annually in dividends. And in this way, the Howard Corporation became a much easier place to channel funds for the CIA rather than some lowly charitable foundation. One would hope, one would think and pray that this is the only time this has ever happened, right? No, at the exact same time, there was a sister foundation in Houston called the Houston Foundation. And the Houston Foundation was run by this guy Jaworski. And Jaworski just happened to be best friends with LBJ. And it's also highly alleged that the Houston Foundation was also highly responsible for being in lockstep with whatever the government wanted. And just being another non governmental organization. Fun note, Jaworski had his private law offices in the Republic National Bank building. Fast forwarding, Jaworski is in charge of the Houston Foundation with high ties to LBJ. Robert Story Jr. is implemented at Lakewood State Bank as their president, a known CIA asset. That's already two members in the web of just these three entities so far: the Republic National Bank Building, the Howard Corporation, and the Hoblitzel Foundation. And Carl Hoblitzel in charge of that unholy trinity. Sounds sketchy, huh? Another fun fact is that both Story and Jaworski served on the Warren Commission. In summary, Jaworski and Hoblitzel channeled funds for the CIA. Now let's move to the other tenants of the Republic National Bank building. Clearly, a 36-story bank building is not completely occupied by the bank, so they have other tenants. For one, there's the Howard Corporation and the Hoblitzel Foundation and Jaworski's law offices, so that's four. There are a few others worth of high consideration. Number one, Schlumberger Oil Services was founded by Konrad and Marcel Schlumberger in Paris, and they are from a region of Germany. They started in Paris, but after World War II, relocated to Houston, and then they've decided to set up shop in Dallas, and they chose the Republic National Bank building as its headquarters. And fun fact, their lawyer Jaworski followed. Jaworski has close ties to LBJ. The main person of note here is Jean de Menil, and he is descended from barons that go all the way back to the Bonaparte era. And he married the daughter of the founder, Konrad Schlumberger. And this guy was connected. Jean, man, he got around. He was first made vice president of the National Bank of Paris, and then he became entire overseas director for the Middle East and the Far East for Schlumberger Oil Services. He was a big shot caller. And by 1963, he and his wife, a true power couple, had a vast network of friends and colleagues all around the oil and gas world, especially due to their extraordinary art collecting and being in that realm of extremely fine art collection. Jean had a great friend, Pregorowski, who was in charge of Petroleum Engineering Incorporated, and he was placed as the senior civilian director to oversee oil production for the entire Defense Department in Europe. An oil tycoon is friends with the guy who's in charge for oil production for the military in Europe. Sounds sketchy. And another fun note is Brigorodsky was called to testify in the Warren Commission, and he confirmed association with Jean and with Oswald's supposed handler, George. Both Jean and Brigorodsky were on the board of what is called the Tolstoy Foundation, and they and their charter said the foundation's first goal was to get Russian World War II refugees to the USA or Canada for those who were handicapped or unable to provide for themselves. And also, they wanted to create a center for Russian culture in America to serve the American born generation of Russian descent. Fun fact, the Tolstoy Foundation hated commies. They were extremely anti communist, and this allowed for like minded, what you would think would be enemies, but they're actually friends. The whole enemy of my enemy is my friend. Everybody who hated commies, they actually ended up very good friends here. The origins of the Schlumberger oil services were very extremely anti-commie and very extremely pro-money. So anybody who had those interests were friends of them. Moving on to our second most interesting tenant, Lone Star Steel. They had a state-of-the-art, government-funded steel plant built in World War II in Tangerfield, Texas, just northeast of Tyler. The heads of 4 Dallas banks, 1 Wichita Falls bank, as well as the chairman of the First National Bank of Dallas were all on the board of Lone Star Steel. They were not the only ones on the board. Former Dallas Mayor R.L. Thornton, and he was also chairman of Mercantile Bank. But also, our best friend James Aston, the Republic National Bank president, he was also on the board of Lone Star Steel, as well as Robert Story, our fun alleged CIA asset who was president of Lakewood Bank, but he had no prior banking experience. There were the co-founders of a drilling company, Josepha and Walton Wise, as well as the business partner of Jack Ruby's personal banker, Michael Nash. Both Zeppa and Wise go into business with Al Gore Meadows. He will be discussed next time with his building, the Meadows building. They had a venture together that intrigued none other than one of the stars of our story, former Nazi SS Otto Skorzeny. We will discuss him much later in great detail. But everybody on that board is very interconnected. It's very disgusting. It's very creepy. And it's completely messed up. Side note, in R.L. Thornton's Mercantile Bank building was also the headquarters of H.L. Hunt Oil. It is alleged that Hunt is the one who dispatched his own personal security to obtain the Zapruder film. And the name of that security ends up in the very financial ledger of our soldier of fortune and master of evidence, Jean-Paul Lafitte, who by his datebook and his ledger opened up a brand new world. The name of that security pimper is in the financial ledger of Jean-Paul Lafitte. Another fun fact is the lab that processed the Zapruder film, Jameson Labs. The head guy there was literally next door neighbors of none other than alleged CIA asset Robert Story. It's all very circumstantial. There's a lot of people involved. My head is spinning right now. But we just have to keep on pushing through because there's too many people involved. Also, Jack Ruby, all of his clubs were owned by H.L. Hunt, the company in the Mercantile Bank building, which is owned by R.L. Thornton, former Dallas mayor, who's on the board of all of these other companies connected to the Republic National Bank building. The centerpiece, the threshold that all money passes through for the CIA in 1963. Our third most interesting tenant of the Republic National Bank building is an aerospace company called LTV. One of the more interesting things about this company is a big investor was also the owner of the Texas School Book Depository building. Granted, to be fair, a lot of business will be intertwined in a local area. But when certain people start popping up over and over again, and there's certain circles that all converge on each other, there is no need for a formal conspiracy, just like George Carlin said. And due to this no need for an explicit conspiracy, well, another literal conspiracy is everybody on the board of LTV was also on the board of our fourth most interesting company, Dresser Industries. Pretty much an identical board. And at Dresser Industries, this is where a few names pop up that we begin to recognize again. President Henry Mallon of Dresser Industries is real good friends with one Prescott Bush and one Allen Dulles. Allen Dulles, previously fired by JFK, was on a warpath. The most notable conspiracy is Dulles essentially led a rogue CIA group. Many think that Dulles was the one who called all the shots. And it is known now that Jean-Pierre Lafitte, in his date book, he was the project manager of this entire operation. He met all the people, he put everything in place, he reported to higher ups when things got confusing, and he executed the plan. The president of Dresser Industries, Henry Mallon, also served on the board of the Republic National Bank building. This was the ideal conduit for his friend Allen Dulles and member of the Republic National Bank building, Alger Meadows, which leads us into our second building of scrutiny, the Meadows building. Dallas was a logical and easy option for channeling CIA funds. All the players were already there. Jaworski and Oblitzel channeled funds for the CIA through both their charitable foundations and their corporations, all with the backing and strength of not just one, but 20 illegally owned banks. And through this, a single building, the Republic National Bank building, became the focal point of all the channeling of those CIA funds. Not only was the Republic National Bank the tenant of the Republic National Bank building, along with the Howard Corporation and the Oblitzel Foundation, everybody in there was highly connected to the military industrial apparatus that all of us question, but we don't really know the names of. Well, here we are to uncover those names. President Kennedy rode into a lion's den that fateful day and could not escape with his life. Hopefully we can. Next time on Architecture and Crime, we break down the Meadows building. Stay tuned, and thank you.